Welcome, Kiernan Kelly, to the podcast. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Now, you're here as part of our Coastal Magic celebration, one of the featured authors for that. So that's very exciting that we all get to go hang out at the beach next month.
I can't wait. I'm so excited. I love this con.
What about Coastal do you love so much?
Coastal is, I've done a lot of cons in my career, lots and lots. Coastal is one of my favorites because Jennifer keeps it smallish, so it's a very intimate con. Everybody is super friendly, super nice, super approachable. So it's kind of like going home, and she has so many fun events that go on during the con that it's just a lot of fun. It really is. It's like going and just hanging out with people who enjoy reading what you write.
Which is the best way to spend a weekend. I mean, in my book, anytime. Yes. Now, Will and I are going for the very first time this year.
Awesome. You're going to love it.
What's your advice for anyone getting ready to make their first trip to make Coastal like the best time ever?
Okay. There are certain things you don't want to miss. Okay. There are staples of the Coastal Magic experience. There is game night, which is usually the first night that we're there. It's either a Wednesday night, which is the night before the con actually starts, or a Thursday night. And authors sponsor table games where you just sit down and you're playing games with the authors, which is phenomenal. And they usually have some swag that they give out. This year, my game that I'm sponsoring is called Unstable Unicorns, which is it's a card game. So I'm looking forward to that. That should be fun. The other thing you don't want to miss is Cinema Craptastique, which is run by Damon Suede. There is nothing funnier than Damon in his underwear giving commentary on a really bad movie. Last year we did Wolves with Jason Momoa, which was fabulous.
That's a great lead-in to Aquaman this year.
Yes, right? It's so funny. It's so incredibly funny. And everybody tweets about the movie as it's going on. And they have trended every year globally for the past, 3 or 4 years. So that's pretty exciting. And they've had instances where the stars of the movies have come on and tweeted. So that's pretty amazing. Not always in a really good way. You have to be careful what you say about these people because they watch when their hashtags come up. And mostly we're, lampooning on the movie. So
because mostly they're really bad. We saw Damon do Glitter a few years back, the Mariah Carey movie.
Yes. And we have Lunch with an Author, which is also a fun feature. You can sign up ahead of time. If you're there as an author, people will sign up to sit with you. And it's a table of maybe 10 to 12 people. Usually people like to, change it up and meet new authors that way. And you're just having lunch and chatting, which is nice. Mm-hmm. And then my favorite panel of all time is Flash Fiction. I've sat on this panel for, I think this is my 4th year. And it's Damon, myself, Lucianne Diver's usually on it, and a few other people that change out every year. And what it is the audience will give us suggestions, and we come up with fiction on the spot. We tell a story. It usually doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Rarely makes sense, which is the whole point, but it's usually outrageously funny. So those are my suggestions.
Nice. Yeah, I think we'll try to get to all those. I know we're going to go to Cinema Craptastique because you can't miss that, but Flash Fiction sounds like a lot of fun too. Now let's dig into your career a little bit because you've been writing for quite a few years now. What led you into writing, and specifically into romance and thrillers?
I started writing back in 2000. I was first published in 2005, so I've been around for a while. I started because the year before, a friend of mine had introduced me to something called fan fiction, which I knew absolutely nothing about. In particular, she introduced me to male fan fiction, Lord of the Rings, which I had never read before. I read one and I was instantly addicted. I found the relationships between the characters were amazing, and this particular story that I read was actually really, really good. And as I read these stories, I started to think to myself, I bet you I could do this. So I started writing in fan fiction. I wrote Lord of the Rings fan fiction. I did not write canon, not even from the very, very beginning. I once wrote that Legolas had a detachable penis.
Okay.
And they would just pass it around, and he would be out in the kitchen having soup. It was a great story. So that was the type of fan fiction that I wrote. But from there, I got such good feedback that I thought, gee, wouldn't it be great if I could actually write something original and make money on it? So I did some research. I went online and I started hunting around for who was publishing. Now, at the time, one of the only publishers around that was taking mail was Torquay Press. Mm-hmm. And at the time, they had a contest going once a month where people could send in short stories, and then they would read them, and they would pick a winner. That winner would win $50. So I wrote a little short story, and I sent it in, and to my surprise, I won. And that made me think, well, gee, maybe I can write something a little bit longer. So I wrote a novella, and I sent that in, and they bought it. I was like, well, maybe I can write a novel. So I did. I wrote Riding Heartbreak Road, and I sent that in, and they bought that. And that I just never looked back after that.
Were you considering writing at all before you got into the fanfic, or?
Yeah, I never wrote before then. I was an artist. I used to tour Florida doing different art shows, but I never really thought seriously about writing. It was just not something that ever came up. But once I started, that was it. I was done.
And here you are more than a decade later now.
Yeah.
That's awesome. How did you find getting into the nitty gritty of telling a story? Did it just kind of flow well for you, kind of the idea of structure, or?
I think I absorbed most of it through osmosis. I've been reading since a very young age, constantly and persistently. I read throughout that's what I did as a kid. I was one of the kids that, did not fit in. I was picked on. The whole bully thing, usual story that you hear all the time. And I spent most of my time alone reading. Mm-hmm. And I developed a huge love for reading, and I kept that throughout my whole life. So I have always read. And I think I just absorbed the structure and the grammar just from reading. Because my degree is in graphic design. It's not in English.
But that's great that you read enough to get it. I think all authors over time, get the concept of structure and everything if they read a lot, which is why all of the authors should, of course, read.
Right.
But to just take it in so much by osmosis, that's pretty awesome to be able to do that.
Well, I do confess I had some terrific editors when I was first starting who were very patient with me over at Torquay. Vincent Diamond comes to mind. This lady put up with more crap from me. She taught me. She broke some really bad habits that I had from in the beginning, right from the start. And she taught me things that I've never done them again. So she must have been a really good teacher.
I'm always happy if my editors don't come back to me with I told you not to do this. Stop doing this. Are there authors out there that inspire you and what you do?
Absolutely. Oh, my God. There's so many. I don't know if I could name them all. In our genre, B.A. Tortuga comes to mind, who writes more than any human being should physically be able to write. Julia Talbot, Shawn Michael, Jody Payne, Tara Lane, Amy Lane, all the Lanes. It just the list goes on and on and on and on and on of people that just inspire me, and I want to be when I grow up.
What genres and subgenres do you like to write in the most? Because you work in romance and thrillers for your MM
Yeah.
stuff.
I do. I like fantasy. I like paranormal. Um, I like horror. I've written some horror that's not MM. That's just horror. Um, because I find that the horror is a nice catharsis when to get away from writing the humor all the time. It's like being, living inside Disney World. Every so often, you want to step out of there and go to Halloween Horror Nights. You just you want to get away from the light and the fluffy, and you want to do something a little darker. And so that kind of balances it out for me. But I try and stay. I like paranormal a lot because I get to make up the rules.
Sure.
Um, Same thing with fantasy, although I don't write high fantasy. I admire it, but I don't write it. Um,
What
I've
keeps
written
you away
westerns.
from it? Just the heavy amount of world building, or is it something else?
It's mostly, I think, there is a huge amount of world building that goes into high fantasy, like you said, and I think that's part of it. My schedule does not allow me to take a year to write a book.
Right.
It just doesn't. In our industry, you have to be quick, and I just don't have the time to devote to make it a worthy project.
Mm-hmm. Now, your most recent book is Uncaged, which is the
Yeah.
third in the In Their Own Skin series.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about the book and the series overall.
The series is my Shapeshifter series. It's based in this universe. Shapeshifters come in all different varieties. They are mostly an organic kind of shapeshifter that evolved naturally, but there are some that are man-made.
Yeah.
They are the villains. In the first book, we meet the heroes of the story, Jax and Dakota. Dakota is a bear shifter. Jax is a wolf shifter. They meet in a ski lodge, which they proceed to wreck. And the villain in that first book is a T-Rex shifter named Kane. In the second book in this series, we meet Kane's offspring, who are a pair of velociraptor shifters. And we meet Jax and Dakota's. Jax and Dakota have founded this ranch for shifters. It's kind of a safe zone. And they go around the country and they pick up stray shifters and they bring them back to the ranch to live so they can live in peace and be themselves and shapeshift whenever they want, blah, blah, blah. And Kane and his people, who are called the Ultimate Predators, they're kind of like a motorcycle gang, they want to destroy the Shifting Sands Ranch. And in the second book, you meet some of the other shifters that Dakota and Jax have brought back to the ranch, the new generation of shifters who get together with Kane's offspring. And then in the third book, it's man versus shifter, where reporters have found out about the Shifting Sands Ranch and how they're trying to expose it. And there's a gorilla shifter in that one.
Oh. All manner of shifters. You weren't kidding about
No,
all
no,
kinds of
I'm not.
shifters.
And every book has bonus stories at the end that I had written as short stories when the books originally released, and then they've gone through re-edits now, and I've re-released them. But I put them all in at the back of these different novels so that readers get extra looks at this universe, because they all take place in the same universe. There are moose shifters, shark shifters, bison shifters. They're all different kinds of shifters. Everything I could think of got stuck into these books.
That's very cool. And you've got other series that are in progress as well. How do you kind of balance between a new book in a series versus a standalone or prepping a re-release?
Well, you can't see it from where you're sitting. You see my storyboard behind me, but in front of me, I have a big whiteboard that's a calendar, and that's got every book that I'm working on is assigned a different due date. and I've got different days marked for what days I'm going to be working on what book. Usually during the course of a day, I work on multiple books. So many hours for one book, so many hours for another, unless I'm on deadline, which I'm on now for the next young adult book that I'm writing that has to begin by the end of the month. So I'm trying to devote a lot more time to that one to get that one out and in before the deadline. So shifting is just shifting between books. It's just a matter of planning.
Mm-hmm. When you're shifting, is it so much that you're writing different books, or are you writing one and maybe editing another and prepping another one that's a re-release, or
all of the above?
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I try and stay busy.
Indeed. I think my mind might explode if I tried to write more than one book at a time. It's hard enough trying to write one and edit another.
Yeah, I tell you the truth, I kind of like it because sometimes you get stuck. You know, you hit that bump in the road, and stepping away and going to work on something on a different project allows you to go back to the original project with fresh eyes. So those few days in between can really be all you need to get over that bump and work things out and keep going.
Mm-hmm. When you're writing in a specific story, and I think the visual aid behind you might play into this question a little bit for the folks who are not watching on the video. Kiernan mentioned a moment ago that behind her is her storyboard, which is this board that has lots of index cards, it looks like, and other various things attached to it. What's your process for getting the story put together and either outlining or not, and diving into the writing?
Well, the first thing I usually come up with, believe it or not, it's like the opposite of every other writer I know, is the title. I usually have a title, and from the title, the story comes. So when I'm creating the storyboard, the first thing I do is put up the title. And then I think of my main characters, and I'll put cards up with their names on it. And then I write a synopsis. I hate writing synopsis.
I think everybody does.
It's like the bane of my existence, especially when I have to write it if I'm writing it for me, it's okay because, I don't care. I'll change it, But when I'm writing it for a publisher, oh gosh, I hate that. But I will write a synopsis, that thing, and I'll put it up on the board behind me. And then from there, I'll start writing scenes. And each scene gets its own index card. Mm-hmm. So that when I actually, the next process then is to actually start writing the story. So once all the scenes are done, I'm just writing each scene. And sometimes that changes. Sometimes Sure. What you see on the board is not going to be what the finished product is. Sometimes the stories take life of their own, want to go in their own direction. But this is how I start.
So you start with an outline and at least a map on where you think you're going, if nothing else.
Right. I used to be a total pantser, by the way. Total pantser. Start writing, just go from beginning to end, and that's it. And then as I started publishing more and I started having more books on the fire, so to speak, I found that, I need to do this. I need to have something something outlined, because then I lose it. Mm-hmm. And I lose the thread, and I start overlapping, and that's never a good thing. So
what inspires your writing? What gives you the plot bunnies to go and create these stories? Because you write across so many different genre types.
I write lots of dares. People dare me to write stuff. It started, my very first dare, I'll never forget. It was back in the days of Torquay Press when we used to do Live Journal. Remember Live Journal? Mm-hmm. And authors would take turns hosting their live journal. And what I would do is I would get up there and I would say, okay, give me, a prompt, and I will write you a little piece of fiction based on the prompt. Well, Elisa from Rainbow Reviews mm-hmm. Posted that she wanted me to write an Amish guy and a sheik. And it was the first time I was ever stumped. I couldn't figure out how I was going to get the Amish guy and the sheik together with the cultural differences and, and I couldn't do it. For 2 years, I worked on this because I couldn't figure it out. And it finally ended up being a novel called Cornfed, which I dedicated to her because she was the first one who ever stumped me.
But you got it eventually.
Huh?
You got it eventually.
I got it eventually, but it took me a long time to do it. But it kept burning at me in the back of my mind that I couldn't fix this. I couldn't do this one dare that Elisa put out. And I finally got it out.
Now we should mention, while we're talking about the dares, before we actually, click the record button, we were talking and surfaced the notion that you had done dinosaur porn once on a dare.
It's true. It was on a dare. I was talking with, I think it was Taylor Law, another talented writer, and we were discussing at the time. There was a big thing. Everybody was chatting about dinosaur porn, and Chuck Tingle, who wrote a lot of this dinosaur porn stuff. And Velociraptor takes the office guy, whatever. And I couldn't understand how this guy was making a living writing this stuff. So I said, can it be that this stuff really sells? So I said, as an experiment, and Taylor dared me, I was going to write dinosaur porn and put it up there under pseudonym and see, what happened. So I took the pseudonym R. Quarry, which stood for Rock Quarry, which was my throwback to the Flintstones. And I wrote a story called T-Rex Fisting Party. Because T-Rex, with the arms, little tiny arms, and I put it up on Amazon and it sold. Like crazy. I was like, are you kidding me? I couldn't bring myself to write anymore. That's the only story out there by R. Quarry. It's this T-Rex Fisting Party. But let me tell you, I had so much fun writing it because it was kind of like I was having fun writing it, and at the same time I was going, oh, I can't believe I'm writing this. Oh.
That's awesome. So yeah, folks, we will have that in the show notes if you want to go to Amazon and pick that up. Coming back to Kiernan Kelly books, what are your trademarks in a Kiernan Kelly book? You mentioned a while ago that you love to write, get the humor in there. So I'm kind of guessing that's probably one of them.
That it is. I write a lot of humor. I also like banter. I like when my characters nit at each other. In a funny way. I enjoy that. I like sarcasm between my characters' dialogue. Almost always one of my characters is snarky.
I like those characters. They're fun.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Especially if both of them snark at each other.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned earlier that you've got young adult going on as well.
I do.
Coming up, as we're recording, is due in about 10 days. You write under the name Dakota Chase for your young adult stuff. And the next book in your Repeating History series is coming out in February, just ahead of Coastal Magic.
Yeah, I believe it's February. Don't hold me to that. It might be March. I think
right.
It might be. Hoping it's February. Let's put it that way.
Fingers crossed on February, perhaps.
Yeah.
Tell us about that book and the series. Okay,
the series is based on it's a time travel series, hence the name Repeating History. It's about these two kids, Ash and Grant, and they were both they didn't know each other in the beginning. They were both on their third strike legally, and they meet in the courtroom when they go to appear before a judge, and they are both given a choice. They can either go to jail or juvie, or they can agree to attend this boys' school called Stanton School for Boys. It's kind of like a military-ish kind of school where they would straighten them up type of thing. And they both agreed to do that. So, of course, they're thrown in as roommates because they're the two newest kids in the school. And when they attend their history class, it turns out that their history professor is Mr. Ambrosius, who is actually Merlin. They don't know this, but they act up in class. He sends them to his office. Now, when they go to his office. It's full of all these artifacts that he has collected over the years. And they get into a fight. They end up setting fire to the office, and they burn all of these priceless artifacts. So Merlin is a little annoyed, and he says to them, look, you can either, we're either going to charge you with arson and you're going away as adults, or I can send you back in time and you can fetch back every one of the artifacts that you've destroyed. And they think he's out of his mind, but they agree, and he winds up sending them back. In the first book, they go back to ancient Egypt, which was Eye of Ra, where they meet I can't even say his name, King Tut, and they fetch back this amulet from King Tut. And the second book was Hammer of the Witches, and they went back to medieval Germany during the Great Witch Burning. The third book was Mammoth, where they go back to 10,000 BC, where they need to get a hunting talisman. And then the book that's coming out early this year is called Alcatraz, and they go back to Alcatraz in the 1920s. And then the book I'm working on right now, which is the fifth book in the series, is I shouldn't even say it. Just for your audience. It's a Western. It's called The Outlaw Trail. And they go back to the Wild Wild West.
Oh, fun. Breaking news right here on the podcast.
Breaking news. And I've got 2 books after this that I've scheduled for this series.
What sent you down the path of young adult?
Back when Torquay was a thing, they decided that they had a drive to publish young adult gay fiction, because there really wasn't a whole lot available, to kids with positive role models in it. Mm-hmm. And happy endings. That was important. The happy ending, because at the time you had like Brokeback Mountain, and you had, all these other very tragic kind of stories, and they wanted to give kids stories that were happy. Mm-hmm. So they started Harmony Inc. No, they did not. That was Dream Spinner. They started Prism, was their line. And they asked me as one of their standing authors if I would be interested in writing something. So I felt very strongly that this was a good idea. So I took the pen name Dakota Chase, and I wrote a book called Changing Jamie, which was probably the darkest book I've written as young adult. I felt that I needed to have a very strong message for kids, and I had just watched a documentary, and I apologize, I don't remember the name of it right now, but Nathan Lane was in it, and it talked about bug chasing. And I had, at the time, no idea what this was. And when I did research on it, and I found out, that it was a lot of young people that were purposely trying to get infected with HIV for a variety of different reasons, I felt this is something that I need to write about. This is something that needs to be brought to the attention of the kids, that this isn't a good idea. This is not something you should be doing. So I wrote that. I couldn't write it for the main character in the book, but they let me write it for a secondary character who ends up getting infected with HIV by bug chasing. So that was like the secondary storyline in the book, but the main character got his happy ever after, at least. So that was the first book that I wrote, and then that has since been republished with Dream Spinner with Harmony Inc. And then I wrote Mad About the Hatter, which was a fantasy book. It was my ode to Lewis Carroll, which I absolutely loved. I had a blast writing. And then I started the Repeating History series.
That's awesome. I like that. I like it when authors get passionate about YA, and they have the stories in their head to put that stuff out there. Yeah. For that audience.
Right. I can tell right now my the way I write YA has changed a little bit. It's gone from being very, what I didn't think at the time was, but what I realize now is preachy. Like I was definitely wearing my mom hat when I was writing those books. To writing about characters who happen to be gay. Mm-hmm. The story is not about them being gay. It's not about coming out. It's not about, it's just them being them. Just like you would read any, young adult book where the character was straight. It's not a big deal. It's just they are what they are. that's how I'm writing the stories, like for the Repeating History series. I want kids to look at this and not think, oh, well, this is a coming out story. No, it's not. It's just like, if you're straight and you're reading this, these people are just like you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're gay and you're reading this is just life. It's just you having a great time in this story.
So besides the new Repeating History book, what else is coming up for you in 2019 that we can look forward to?
Oh, my. Well, I'm working on the sequel to Seti's Heart, which Dream Spinner just re-released this past year. So I'm working on a sequel to that. I'm working on a serial killer book. I'm working on a shapeshifter book. I'm working on a very light and fluffy book that I'm really enjoying right now because it's absolutely nothing but fluff. It's about a kid's television host. It's just very fluffy. What else? I've got the Repeating History series I'm working on. I just sold, a lesbian young adult to Harmony Inc. Called Every Which Way, and that's coming out I think at the end of September, October, thereabouts this year. What else do I have on the fire? I think that's about it for. Oh, and I have to write the next. I write the Midnight Rodeo series with B.A. Tortuga and Julia Talbot, and I've got my next book is due on that, so I've got to get that started. And also, I write the what is the name of it? There are so many now, I've forgotten. That's another series I write with them that I have to get the next book out. And I apologize, I'm having a brain fart. I can't remember the name of the series.
No worries.
So lots of stuff.
You got a lot going on.
Yeah.
What's the best way for everyone to keep up with you online so they can keep track of this stuff as it comes out?
Facebook is always the best way to get a hold of me and to see what's new with me. I'm obviously on there as Kiernan Kelly. That's about it. I've got my website, which is KiernanKelly.com. I've also got DakotaChase.com. And I also have my books listed on all the major distributors, Amazon, Kobo, iTunes. I've also got them listed on evilplotbunny.com. And I'm on Twitter, and I'm on,
all the usual haunts.
The usual haunts, yeah.
Excellent. Well, Kiernan, thank you so much for hanging out with us. I look forward to seeing you in just a couple weeks at Coastal Magic.
Oh, I know. I can't wait to see you, too. I'm very excited. Thank you for having me.